Hello, everybody. Guten Tag. Willkommen. Hopefully, you're going to learn a little bit of something about tax. It's probably not the highlight of your day. I'll be honest, but you know, something which a lot of you are probably involved with in some way. Okay, let's try that. So, when companies are expanding, selling cross-border, going internationally, you know, everyone starts looking at translating. They look at localization. They look at web platforms. They look at currencies. Tax is probably one of the last things that a lot of companies look at, but it's actually one of the things which is becoming more complex globally. And hopefully you'll hear a little bit about that and get some solutions for it today. So let me tell you a little bit about Avalara, first of all. Avalara, we are a tax compliance technology company. We are US-based. We have close to 2,000 employees, probably, in the next couple of months. We've got offices around the globe. In Europe, we've got a UK head office. We've got Brazil. We've got India. We've got several offices across the US. But essentially what we do is we help companies that are selling internationally to make sure that they are complying with local taxes. And when I talk about tax, I'm talking about VAT. I'm talking about sales tax, duties, GST, goods and services taxes. So we have a range of software and services that can help companies understand where they have obligations, help them get registered, help them calculate the right taxes, and then also file those taxes globally. Handful of customers, just to give you an idea of the kind of companies that we're working with. You might not have heard of Avalara before, but if you've transacted with a lot of these companies, you'll have been using our services indirectly. So we help the likes of Shell and BP with their global excise. Shared service centers around the world are using our VAT technology, logistics companies, e-commerce retailers. So we're going to talk a little bit about US. A lot of you will be familiar with VAT in Europe. Sales tax is complex. It's even more complex, and you'll get to see why. But there's a few solutions out there that can help you automate it. So first of all, just what is sales tax? It's a tax on the customer, on the point of purchase. Not every state has sales tax. Only 45 states do. And when you break it down in the US, you've got state level of tax, you've got county level, you've got city level of tax, and some special jurisdictions. There's actually 12,000 jurisdictions in the US. So if you think of Europe, Germany is one jurisdiction, UK is one jurisdiction. In the US, there's 12,000. And there's 5 states that don't have sales tax currently today. So just how complex is it? I'm just going to show you an example here from one state, New York. And this is going to be different state by state. So in New York, for some reason, they've decided that it makes sense to tax bicycle gloves, but not gardening gloves. Shower caps are taxable, but swimming caps are not. Walking boots versus hiking boots. So, when you're in the US, if you're used to Europe, you're used to maybe 2 or 3 different rates of VAT per country. In the US, you need to actually break it down at a SKU level, at a product level, and figure out exactly what it is you're selling, and make sure that you're using the right tax code for that product. This map is, actually I love this map. That patchwork, all those different colors you saw at the beginning are all those different taxing jurisdictions. And we're going to delve into Colorado. So this is just showing how complex it is on a location level. Because if you have a zip code, it's not accurate enough. You actually need to know the pinpoint address of where your products are being shipped from, and also where they're being shipped to. So this is showing 2 neighboring properties. One is on 7450 Layden Street, and it has a sales tax rate of 9.25%. It's made up of a Colorado state tax, an Adams County tax, a Commerce City tax, and some special jurisdictions. The house next door 4.75%. So as well as knowing what you're selling, you need to know exact pinpoint addresses of where you're selling to as well in order to be accurate. But that's not all. You also need to know where you have obligations. Now, things changed a little bit last year, but prior to last year, it wasn't easy. It was still complex, but at least there were some clear guidelines around it. Essentially, if you had a physical presence in the US, if you had employees, offices, warehouses, if you stored stock, inventory in a warehouse, that would mean you had a physical presence and you had to register for sales tax. There's a load of other things. This isn't the list. There's probably about 30 or 40 different activities that can create a nexus, but those are some of the main ones, even like trade shows and having employees that travel to certain states 3 or 4 times a year. All these things created sales tax obligations. Last year, though, that all changed. There was a big Supreme Court ruling, South Dakota versus Wayfair, which has changed everything on its head. So South Dakota took Wayfair to the Supreme Court and said, look, we want to start charging sales tax on your internet sales. Wayfair was an example of a retailer that was doing considerable business in that state, but not actually filing sales tax. And this has been going back and forth for many years, but actually the Supreme Court actually ruled in favor of South Dakota. And they said, actually, yeah, this is a landmark case. We're going to allow you to start charging sales tax on internet sales, e-commerce sales. And that's what it is. They've invented economic nexus. It's a sales tax imposed on the seller once they hit a certain level of economic activity. So it's like distant sales thresholds in Europe. So the way South Dakota actually translated this is $100,000. Once you sell over $100,000 into South Dakota, you have to register for sales tax there, or 200 separate transactions. Now, and that applies to online, offline, products, services, there's no distinction. And a lot of other states decided, well, if South Dakota's going to do this, we want to do this. So this was October 2017. 6 or 7 states had economic nexus. Roll on a year, there's actually close to 28, 29 states. And every state is going to look at it slightly differently. There might be some different thresholds. Some are 500,000, some are 1 million, most are 100,000. And some are based on gross sales, some on retail sales. Again, it varies state by state. But if you fast forward that to a month ago, this is what it looks like now. There's actually 25 states. And I think probably by the middle of this year, all those gray states are probably going to be turning blue or very close to it. So this is it. It's affecting nearly every state. California just came on board this year. New York came on board this year. Florida's probably not too far off. But the US is becoming a bit like Europe in a way, distant sales thresholds. So it affects everyone. It doesn't affect just US sellers, it affects you guys. If you're selling to customers in the US, you are also eligible for these sales tax legislation as well and rules. But the US isn't the only complex place to do business. I'm going to touch on a couple of other areas, and I'm going to go back to the US again. But you'll be familiar with Europe, with different VAT rates, having to register for VAT in different countries. Marketplaces is an interesting one. A lot of states in the US, as well as governments, are actually putting a lot of pressure on marketplaces to ensure that their sellers are complying with VAT, registered for VAT and filing VAT. Germany is one country which has done this. UK has as well. I mean, in Germany, they are imposing a certificate, an F22 certificate, which every seller has to fill out in order to sell on a marketplace. And if you don't have that piece of paper, you won't be allowed to sell on Amazon or eBay. So a lot of states, a lot of governments are actually forcing marketplaces to effectively enforce tax compliance. Holding stock in fulfillment centers. If you're using Amazon's FBA program, once you hold stock in different countries, you need to start registering for VAT. And in the US, a lot of marketplaces are actually being forced to divulge the details of sellers. So it's no longer possible to hide. Tax authorities are having to say who their sellers are, who owns stock, and the tax authorities can then come after you. Brexit, I couldn't be a Brit on the stage without saying Brexit is going to create some, let me go back, create some more tax headaches. We don't know what it is. I don't think anyone knows what. Theresa May certainly doesn't know. But certainly there's going to be some different VAT rates. There's going to be, if the UK leaves the European Union, if you're doing business in the UK or UK businesses doing outside, there'll be extra legislation, extra tax registrations, there'll be extra tariffs, there'll be all sorts of things. What we're also seeing as well is a big move to digital. Tax is probably one of the oldest industries where, if you had a tax problem or tax question, you'd go to a tax advisor. They'd charge you huge amounts of money to give you an answer. Governments are trying to digitize a lot of this now. And what we're seeing in the UK and Italy and Hungary and Poland and Spain is a big move to digitizing tax. So if you look at some of these countries here, you might be familiar with some of these. You might not be familiar with India and Brazil, but they're all kind of similar in that they're actually forcing companies to not only just fill out forms and say how much tax they owe, but actually provide tax, transactional tax information, transactional data. And that's, over time, going to allow governments to actually see real time exactly what you're selling and then how much to charge you. And Brazil's probably one of the most bizarre ones there, where you actually have to contact the government. You have to get a digital seal to put on an invoice before you can sell anything, which means the Brazilian government has views. It can view transactional data in real time. It's essentially to reduce the VAT gap, to reduce fraud, reduce errors, but ultimately it's to increase tax revenues. So what are the next steps? What would you, and the whole point of this isn't really to scare you. It's really to, just inform you that it's changing. The world of tax compliance is changing. It's complex, but there's a lot of solutions and a lot of ideas and a lot of ways of handling it. So in the US, for example, you might be one of 4 types of seller, types of company. You might be, you might think you have Nexus. You might think you have some tax obligations, but you're not quite sure what to do about it. So what you're going to do, you're going to study up, research, find out where your activities are, find out what the regulations are, get a plan in place, get registered. There's a lot of self-service you can do, self-serve. You might be the second bucket of people, which is, you might have established a Nexus. You might already be selling in one state, but then you realize that actually you're selling over the thresholds. So you've got growing obligations. So if you wanted to do this yourself, you'd need to register for sales tax, contact the state, fill out the forms, ensure that your items are taxed correctly, and then make sure that the forms are filled out. It's all doable, but as you get more and more states, it becomes onerous. The third bucket could be, there's probably quite a lot of sellers in this bucket. There's probably quite a lot of American companies that are in this bucket where they know they have some obligations, but they're just trying to hide below the radar, and they're neglecting their obligations. Well, in those situations, you need to figure out how much tax is owed. You need to go back retrospectively to see what the tax rate was in a certain month, and then decide what's the best way of handling that. Or you could be the 4th bucket of people, which is bury your head in the sand. And there's quite a few of those. But anyway, as I said, the tax authorities are getting clever. Marketplaces are being forced to divulge. So I think there's going to be less of that happening as we progress. So what can you do? Or what can, you could do this yourself. You can come to companies like Avalara or other tax advisors. We can do a couple of things. We can help you understand where you've got tax obligations. We do something called a Nexus study. So we can take a detailed look at your business activities, your commercial relationships, and we can tell you where you need to register, what you need to do. It might be that there's some historical tax to look at, and we can look at that, and we can help you figure that out and look at ways of automating things as well. VAT, it's not just a US thing. If you are selling globally, shipping goods around the world, storing goods in different countries, if you've got questions, we can help you understand what you need to do, where you need to register, where you need to file VAT. And then if you really, looking to automate a lot of processes, there's software. There's software out there that automates all of this. If you go back to the very first slide, one of the things there was 700 integrations. We integrate to all e-commerce platforms, CRM systems, ERPs, accounting software. We can, at the point of a transaction, there's an API call to us. It'll look at the details of the transaction, what you've sold, the tax code, the address of where it's shipping from, shipping to, and we can put the breakdown of taxes in the checkout for you in real time. We can help companies who need to, and customers who are exempt, selling B2B. And then we can also take that tax data, which is in the cloud, as a cloud-based solution, and file those tax returns globally as well. And at the same time, we have vast teams of content people who are speaking to tax authorities, speaking to governments, and making sure that we've got the most up-to-date content in our systems. So it is complex, but there are certainly a range of software and solutions out there to help you automate however you want to do business, whichever countries you're looking at doing business in. And that was a short little introduction into tax compliance, and I'll take any questions, or we have a rather large stand out there. You can't actually miss it. You're more than welcome to come over and have a chat to one of the team and pick up some orange sunglasses while you're there as well.
Thank you very much, Sacha. So who has the first question from the audience?
Thank you. Hi, thanks for the presentation. I currently work with TaxJar. What does set you apart? What would be a reason to switch?
Good question. We know TaxJar very well. There are other companies who do similar services to us. And TaxJar's we call them the new kid on the block. They are.
Say again, please. Say again, please.
They're the new kid on the block. We've been around since 2004. They've been around a handful of years. They have software which is really focused just on the US, whereas we have a bit more content that covers more global requirements. The number of integrations, we have over 700. I think TaxJar have only a handful. We're and I'm not putting them down in any way. What they do is great, but we're probably more established, and we're approved by a lot of the US states on a streamlined sales tax initiative as well, which TaxJar isn't as well. So it really depends on what you're looking for.
Maybe to give you a background, like we are a German company operating in the US without a US entity.
Sorry, say that again?
A German company operating in the United States without a US entity. If that makes any difference.
That doesn't make a difference. No, it doesn't make a difference. You could still choose to sort out your sales tax compliance or not, either through a US entity or through a German entity.
Thanks.
Okay.
Any other question from the audience? Okay, I have one question. Do you have some specific solution for selling on Amazon?
Yeah, we do. Yeah. In Europe, we're actually built into Amazon's Seller Central platform. So we are the default tax compliance engine. If you go to Amazon, if you see VAT services on Amazon, it's us actually powering it. It's an Amazon program, but we're actually powering it behind the scenes. So if you're using pan-EU FBA, you need to be registered for VAT in 7 European countries, and we can facilitate the registration of VAT and also the filing of VAT in those countries. In the US, we've got a slightly different program called Trust File, and this is actually a little bit like TaxJar's service, where we can actually take your Amazon sales data, we can plug it into our system, and then create the different forms that you need to file. And what, again, just going back to the TaxJar question, TaxJar will probably encourage you to fill the forms out and send them yourselves. We can automate the whole process. So yeah, a few different ways of interacting with Amazon, and not just Amazon, but other marketplaces as well.
Can you also do invoicing? Because we don't need to write invoices in the US, but we would like to for German bookkeeping. Can you show that through the platform?
Yeah, we don't do invoicing as such, e-invoicing, but we do have a piece of software that can give you the correct European messaging to put on invoicing, because in Europe you need to have the right links to the right European directives and things like that. So we do have that, but it's not an invoicing product as such. Oh, for the US? No, we don't do invoicing for the US. Obviously, the tax element you could use on an invoice, but yeah. Okay?
Okay, so you said you are integrated in Seller Central in Amazon. So you mean the data which is coming to the VAT calculation service, VCS, is the data provided by Avalara?
Sorry, is the data provided where, sorry?
Exactly, so you mentioned you are integrated in Seller Central, right?
Yes.
So Amazon is providing VAT calculation services for the sellers.
Correct.
And we are an ERP, a third-party system. We get this data from Amazon, right, to the new VCS Lite. The data which Amazon is providing to us is delivered by you, by Avalara? So you are doing the math for Amazon?
So when you say the maths, no. Amazon will take care of the calculation of tax. So Amazon does that bit. Amazon is the engine there, but we're the filing engine, and we're the registration engine. We're the kind of the either end of that tax compliance piece.
Okay.
Yeah.
One more question? Okay, if there are no more questions, thank you again, Sacha, for your performance. And if you have some specific questions, you can talk on this side.